in the sun. They are stone and steel and wood and wire. They can change two things to one. They are languages and letters. They are poetry and all. They are love and understanding, and they're better than able. They are languages and letters. They are poetry and all. They are love and understanding, and they're better than able. There are canyons, they are yawning in the night. They are rank and bitter anger, they are all devoid of light. They are fear and blind suspicion, they are apathy and pride. They are dark and soul foreboding, they're so very wide. They are fear and blind suspicion, they are apathy and pride. They are dark and soul foreboding, and they're so very wide.
Good morning, actually. This is 10 o'clock in the morning on let me see what date this
the
is.
26th
on
August.
August 26th, Wednesday. Next to me is Susan Comont. We have Dennis Carius on the line.
And who are you?
I'm Jeff. And I'm Jeff Beller. And this is Wednesday World Call-In. That was Bill Staines singing to us on this particular
First Million Miles.
First Million Miles.
And I assume that's referring to all the traveling he did to go from one performance to another.
The other, right? Yeah. And what I'm going to try to do here is, Susan's going to tell you why she set up the program and how she set it up. I'm going to try to get set up for our next program, so I'm going to look like I'm busy here. But go ahead and Sue, would you?
So you're throwing me the reins here, the reins to the chariot, and the horse is already running. Actually, today was let's see, 36 years ago, a very important day, a very dramatic day for me, because that was the day that my son was born, and anyone who's had a child understands that with the birth of a child, you know, whether you're the female involved or the male involved, it's a profound moment in your life, and suddenly changes everything about how you make your decisions, how you view the future, etc. Many, many things change. And of course, after 38 years, even then you feel a certain tugging of responsibility, even though your child is independent and has their own family, etc. And happy birthday, Alan. But just a shout out there. But it's an interesting thing. As I've gotten older, I've been trying to work through various old concepts that I had about what my responsibility is to my own child, and what I feel I can do to help, you know, children that are being born now, or children that are growing up, or children that are just about to be independent. I mean, I'm starting to see all children, you know, that are not even my child. You know, I only had the one, but I don't make a differentiation anymore between, you know, a child that I gave birth to and children that other people are constantly, you know, every second that goes, there's another child born, or less than a second. I mean, I guess you can go to a population website, I think, and watch that, the population, how it's increasing. But that's just a side thing that's kind of interesting if you're interested in that. But what I'm driving at is what is our responsibility to generations that are coming up now, and generations that are developing now, and to our present, the population that we're living in now. What is the most effective thing if you have some free time, if you have some ability to, some wiggle room, let's say, in your life to do something different
free time.
Then go to work, in a strict schedule to make money. You can step out of that routine for a significant amount of time. If you can, what will you do with that time? I was with a little girl yesterday. We took them out on our boat, and she's about 9.5, 10 years old. And she said, she asked me, she said, if you had a wish, what would you wish? And I said, well, that's hard to do. You're going to have to let me think about it, and and if I think of what I would wish, I will let you know. And she said, and I said to her, so what would you wish? And she said, I'd wish that I had 5 wishes. So she would perpetuate the wishes. So that she's actually suspending things similar to the way that I did. I said, well, I'm going to defer that decision till later because I really don't know what would be the best thing to wish for. And she doesn't really either, but she knows she doesn't want to lose her one wish by wishing something that she would regret. So, when you get to the point where you have some wiggle room, some free time, what will you do with it? What will that, you got to make a good decision about it. You got to say, is the best use of this time? What do I know that I think would be useful to other people in the future? And Jeff and I were talking this morning, and I still had these ideas in my head that, there was a certain amount of obligation I have, to my son. He went into debt for his schooling, and like many, many other people did. Because we have all kinds of pressures to get higher education, that supposedly will get you a better job and more money. And of course, the goal is more money, and supposedly that's going to equate to more happiness. But we know it doesn't. It just equates to more money is what it does, and maybe it doesn't. Sometimes you make that decision to get that higher degree, and all it does is put you into more debt. Of course, that makes money for someone else, but it doesn't do you much good. And so, I look at that.
Slavery.
I look at that and I think, well, these are people that have been, crippled by their debt, and they should be released from it. And you would hope that. Similar to what the Bible proclaimed, you have a jubilee and everybody's free from their debt, and that seemed like a pretty reasonable thing to do, because at some point everyone makes a mistake and or is persuaded to make mistakes and goes into debt. So, and I'm thinking, well, what's the best way? If I had some extra cash, should I release my son from his debt if I could, or is it? Or am I making a decision now to do this programming and to spend this time, 3 days a week, at least, to get information to everyone, to try to get as much information out that isn't being considered, as far as I can see, because I listen to a lot of news sources, and I don't hear sufficient, incisive, and interesting information. I just hear repetition on the part of every one of the news outlets of what the other outlet is saying each day. They have a program they put out, and they all have their different slants at it. And I'm not getting educated. I think that there's a lot that isn't being broadcast, and I don't even know if people who are going into higher education are being even allowed to learn sufficient diversity of information anymore. But it's all there, you know, kind of accumulating in layers and layers and layers on our in the internet. What do you want to call it? Encyclopedia or archives, library. You know, it's accumulating there, but nobody seems to really want to disperse it so that people can start conversing about it, and conversing about it in terms of what will make things better for every human participant on the planet. But not only that, to preserve the life that's on this planet, which is it's totally as far as we know, and that's all we can go by is what we know. This is it. This is where life is, you know. And as much as we've been asked to live in our imaginations and in our belief systems of religion and economics and you know, whatever kinds of ways that we try to be part of communities that seem to be functioning, as much as we try to lose ourselves in those things, the real thing that's happening on this planet is life itself. And you know, it's not only human life, it's plant life, it's animal life. And I just feel that if I get, you know, trapped like everyone else is, and like I've been most of my life, and I still, part of my mind says, you know, if I can, you know, build
this or sell that,
right, exactly, or pay this off,
make money, you'll be happier.
Yeah, that you'll somehow get control.
Or help your child get ahead, then you're going to have more control.
And that it'll be a benefit somehow. But I don't think that working within this kind of flawed economics that we all are asked to work in now is going to help future generations. I think what might help future generations is getting more information out about alternatives to what our economics it is possible for our economics to do. We got to this point through a lot of really kind of, you know, from what I've read and tried to study for many years now, and I'm reading Critical Path, you know, Buckminster Fuller's rendition of how our economic system evolved. You know, he's talking about from the First World War and the influences that occurred then. And he talks back into the past. We went over that, you know, how the taller guy was in control, and then the guy on the horse was in control because he could knock out the taller guy because he was on the horse.
Right makes
but, you know,
right makes right.
But then at that point, he goes even further, and we'll read a little bit about that today. How did we get to this point, you know? And Buckminster Fuller has a lot of very incisive things to say because he lived through that period. He was a young person at that time, but he did experience the entrance of the United States into the First World War, the crash, you know, between the wars, and it was between the wars, right?
Yeah, he was between the First and Second World War.
And then the Second World War, how we were, you know, they were really, actually, there were one war because it all just sort of blended in.
Well, it was so close together.
Yes, exactly. And I'll read some of, you know, what I've been researching about that. But you know, the question is, where do you put that little bit of time that you have? Where to the most advantage for the next generations? Where can that's what I'm thinking. What can I do? What can I be confident and excited about putting my time into for the rest of my life to, and I hope that this will help, of course, you know, my son, my grandchildren,
right.
my, you know, but I'm looking much broader than that because I don't think that anything I can do for them will help them if the rest of the population is suffering and can't get what they need to survive, because that will impact, everybody will be impacted. There's no way to buy yourself out of the situation that we're all, the economics that we're all participating in right now. You can't buy your way into a island.
As you're talking about this, let me just explain something. Supposing you say, I'm going to put myself in a position where I'll never get sick. But all of a sudden, someone gets a disease 100 miles away. Now, you say, well, he's sick over there, so it doesn't affect me. But that germ, that sickness gets transmitted to another person, maybe only 50 miles away. And before you know it, 1,000 people have the sicknesses because we didn't take care of the problem with the first person who got sick. Our job as a species is to be able to think this through and say, is there a way we can help people so they don't get sick? And what the economic system is doing, it's creating a sickness all over the world that's making everybody into a slave to its own system. The sickness is the economic system itself. Our politicians are involved with this economic system worldwide. We are killing our planet. And when I say, I don't mean we are killing our planet. We are killing our system as far as our air, our water, and our food supply. So we will kill our species off unless we use our brain to stop killing our atmosphere, our food, and our water supply. And if we kill one another because of our stupidity, like with a nuclear war or First World War or Second World War or might is right, we're going to wipe out our species and wipe out our living, our life support. And that's my point, is we need to use our brain, and it's time to move to the next level, just like we thought about gravity, 400 years ago.
The next level of economics.
The next level of intellect.
Yes, and the intellect that we're talking about, the area that is controlling people's lives now is economics, and the belief in the. May I conclude my statement?
You go ahead. I just wanted to bring that out.
Yeah, and so what I'm saying is, I made an executive decision today, and I actually broadcasting it because I don't want to go back on it. I want to make sure that I'm committed to it, because there's so many individuals that we talk to over and over again, and they try to convince us that what we're doing is foolish, or stop doing it, or this is somehow offensive to them, that we are trying to suggest that there's another way to conduct our economic agreement with each other, our social economic behaviors, and we get a lot of resistance, and it does have an impact, and it's very hard to keep focus when you're getting so much resistance. But then again, we sometimes and thankfully get encouragement. So that's a good thing. But I just wanted to finish.
When you get a nice email from somebody that says, "Boy, this what you hear is great stuff," and this will apply.
Or somebody gives us a phone call.
Well, yeah, and they say you did great work.
So that sets us up for another, at least a week or so, or a couple of months. But we can't determine our behavior on what people are saying or not saying to us. We have to have a conviction behind it, which we do, and it keeps us going. But I have to say that this whole thing about what I can do for my own child is hung on for me for for most of my life, because I feel, as any parent would, you feel that you are responsible for bringing a child into the world. So somehow you're responsible all your life for this act, and At this point, I feel that my responsibility has shifted to something that is more profound than what I can do with writing a check or something like that. So I'm saying to my son, happy birthday, and of course, and I have made an executive decision. I'm not going to pay off your student loan, but I'm going to give you a gift of my own mind, and your children a gift of my mind, and what I can, try to bring about with, this kind of programming, help to bring about a better economic system
that doesn't put people
and
into
that doesn't
slavery.
put people into slavery. And so I'm looking to the future of your children and the future of their children, if they should have any. And I'm trying to see this in a much bigger picture. And so that's my gift today on your birthday.
And it's trying to get this gift given to the entire, we're just one or two or three or four or five people who say that we know that there's something radically wrong. And I think most people who we talk to know that there's something wrong with our economic system. Just go into your local fast food store or your local big box store and just personally talk to one of the salespeople, and they know they're working so hard. They hate their job. They can hardly make ends meet. They keep on coming up with bigger and bigger loans. They keep on voting. We have this voting frenzy for, it's a frenzy now, voting and the economics and what's going on in the stock market. And we hear about the stock market regularly. Most people don't even know what hedge funds are. They're not into stocks or bonds. They're trying to eat. They're trying to make a living. Well, they're trying to live. They're born living, and now they're working their butts off to support a small percentage of the world population who's got them into slavery. And it doesn't be a black or white or yellow or Irish to be into slaves. The very wealthy have always put people into servitude for them.
Okay, let's go on with our summary for today, right?
Go ahead.
And then I'll focus what we want to talk about.
How did we get into this fix?
All right, that was what I entitled it. How did we get into this fix? Okay, and I wrote a little summary. We were trying to develop civilization and ended up with uncivilization. Our modern economics is organized crime against humanity.
And as somebody said, I think his name was Mo, said, that's thugs. We're voting between two different gangs,
right.
Two different thugs, and now we're coming up with, they're just the same thugs, but with just different names.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and Jeff discouraged me from tweeting this, but I'm just going to say it. I said this, what would be an interesting tweet is to say, Mr. Trump, you're not hired. We're not even going to fire him. We're just say, Mr. Trump, you're just not hired. You're not hired.
But he gets so much press because
he has so much money. And there's so much admiration.
I can't turn the media on, this mainstream media on without hearing this guy's name.
And so here's an example of the crime against humanity. The thugs. He's acting like a thug, Mr. Trump. All of them act like thugs. Be it Trump, or be it McCain, or be it Bush or Obama. They're acting like thugs. They're all putting drones into the world. They're all attacking people and blaming ISIS or blaming another group of people. They're thugs. They're killing other people in the name of freedom or freedom or democracy. But that's not freedom or democracy if you're putting your own constituents into working, 70, 80, 90, 100 hours a week to stay alive. That is thuggery. That is bullyism. That's what we're doing now. And if we keep on doing the same old stuff with this election frenzy or the stock market frenzy,
We are doing the same thing we've done since the beginning of civilization, 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. My God, man, that's a form of insanity to keep on pushing the same buttons and getting the same results. We need to change our thinking about the economic system.
Okay, I'll go on with the summary that, okay, our modern economics is organized crime against humanity. How did it get this way? How long has it been evolving toward this present state? In the book Critical Path, Buckminster Fuller attempts to explain. And I say, we're listening, what about you? I'll read some of the beginning of
before you start, please go online. Dennis, if you can go online, I can see how many people are viewing us. If you can go online on your computer and watch Bridges Programming, and then go YouTube Bridges Programming and see what comes up. I'm just curious to see how it looks on your screen. So could you do that?
Yeah, we're still.
You're curious. I'm curious.
Dennis curious.
Dennis curious. So just go online and type in YouTube, 2 words, Bridges Programming, 2 more words on search, and it should pop up, and you'll see, and I'll see when you're online. I can actually see the different people who come online, by the way, which is sort of fun.
Good.
And I'm not suggesting, that, but I am in a way, because I just made an executive decision not to pay off a student loan. If everybody made that decision, then we would have free education, which is what the HRM talks about. Everybody's entitled. And the same thing holds true with the stock market. If nobody bought stocks,
shelter. If nobody bought stocks, there'd be no stock market.
Right.
If nobody believed in the economic system, there would be no economic system the way it is now. If people didn't stop buying, like this is Alan's 38th or 39th birthday. If we didn't start by giving presents to kids when they were born to tell them how much we love them is by the gifts we give them, that's ridiculous. I mean, I remember when my kids were growing up, when Christmas time came, I didn't buy them gifts or toys. I allowed them to buy 1 toy, and then we bought what they needed at some point in time for clothing. That was things they needed, not that they wanted, and they had 1 want that we figured it'd be sort of fun to have. So they had to choose 1 want instead of what they then you learn
how to differentiate between.
So when someone says, "Can you make a wish? What's your wish?" and I want to, when you brought the wish out, when the child asked for wishes, let me give you a quick true story. A friend of mine, he's a close friend of mine, and his wife, they're probably my age, and they had no grandchildren, and their daughter. She was pregnant and she was going to have a child, and they were so excited about having this child. And all of a sudden, and they're a religious couple, and all of a sudden she lost the child, and she miscarried. And they was terribly depressed. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, someone knocks on their door and said, "This is the child of your son." And they did a test, and sure enough, that was their grandchild. And then the fellow got married and had another child. Now they have 2 grandchildren. And the person who married had 2 children. Well, there's more children than they know what to do with now. Well, I mean, look, be careful what you wish for. Because, and they love their children. I'm not saying they don't, but it's a tremendous amount of work for this couple who's getting older. And to take care of these children, because there's a problem within the economic system, which is creating a problem for the son who had the kids. And of course, it's creating a problem for many people in the economic system. So I'm saying to you, there's a wish, and here you had your wish granted. And my God, be careful what you wish for.
We've heard that many times.
And be careful if you put someone in office who you think is going to benefit you, because they are good business people.
And that they're super wealthy, and maybe, somebody will rub off on you.
Yeah, this is absolutely insane.
The wealth is a tool. It's not somebody's good decision making. It's just a tool. We've turned it into an idol. And you know what happens when that
And when someone says I'm rich and they applaud you for being rich,
right,
that's a terrifying
which happened
thing.
at one of
The meetings.
Trump's
No, I wouldn't keep on
gatherings.
saying his name. I don't want to give him
Well,
credit.
it doesn't matter. He's not hired.
No,
you know.
well, the thing is, we need to get to a point where, and I don't know who to hire. I mean, I don't know whether it should be a woman, as Dennis would say, we need to hire another woman, but I don't think that's the case. I think we need to hire somebody who says we need to help humanity and we need to stop killing people. And the way we do that is we say every human being must have their basic needs met at any cost. There's no financial cost to this. There's a cost that requires thinking and a cost that requires action. That's the cost. At any cost for thinking and action. And the world has to come together and make sure all humanity has their basic needs met. And if you look on your screen, this is brought to you by the Human Renewable Energy Measure. That's the HREM.org. We don't sell anything with this. We don't ask you to put your credit card in. We don't ask you to join a lottery or sign up. Please get this. If you can understand what we're talking about, just take the message out and start your own group, and then tell people not to join your group, but start their own group. And then ask them not to start that group, get another group started. So there's no head on the snake.
Well, this is the gathering of individuals to make life better for humanity. The gathering of individuals.
We're individuals, and if we understand what the problem is and there's a suggested solution, please don't hesitate. Bridges programming that you're watching is a source of getting people with their own ideas under one platform that we do not, if you have a humanitarian idea that doesn't preach hate, we will give you an hour programming right now, absolutely free, until we can't afford to do it anymore. And then we're going to continue doing this as long as we can afford it, to make, and unfortunately the economic system dictates that. We need more people to volunteer. We need more programming on here.
So everything's very precarious.
Yes, we need to. Humanity is precarious. Your life, your 80 years of life is very precarious. I don't mean carious. I mean precarious.
Not precarious.
But if you walk in front of a there's curious, and then there's carious, and then there's precarious, and then there's. But if you walk in front of a truck, you're going to die. Now, you may eat the best health foods in the world, but when you cross that major road with 4 strands of traffic, man, you get hit by a car, all the health food in the world ain't going to save you. So we got to be very careful. So life is very, very, very precarious. And
let's hear a little bit from Buckminster Fuller, since I did say that I was going
okay, go ahead. I have to go down. I have to go
talk about, and I did research this, and oftentimes on these programs we go off in some other direction than what the summary was saying. And this is around page, let me see, 83 in the book.
And this is a big book, by the way.
Yeah, right. We're only a quarter.
No, before you get to that, this book is now out of print. It's an excellent book. The only way we're able to get this book is through a library, and we tried to get it. You can get a used copy.
You can get them off Amazon, the used copies.
The used copies, but you can't get new ones. And
it's out of print.
And they're out of print. So
you can't get it from Barnes and Noble. They say, oh no, we can't do that. We can't do that.
Now, if you want to, you can also, there's a PDF. We don't know if it's the whole book, though.
Yeah, I'm still trying to.
So we're going to try
I think somebody put a PDF online.
But if there's a PDF, we should get that out there.
But anyway, and this is not something that we can read aloud and try to get a book tape done on. It's
just too big,
long.
But you can look it up online, and hopefully you'll be able to see it. I'll be right back. I have to take a little break, my personal self, and I'll be right back.
Well, okay, well, you're taking your break.
You're going to read that.
I'm going to try to work us into what Buckminster Fuller is saying was happening in 1914. And this was, just at the very beginning of World War I. He's saying here, and some of it I'm quoting and some of it I'm paraphrasing, England and her allies persuaded the US that they were, quote, fighting to save democracy. And he remembers as a young man, a young boy at that time, how that was the catchphrase. You were fighting to save democracy. That was how they got the population of the United States behind the idea that they needed to enter the war. And England told our government, what was needed to cope with the German aggression, the submarines and the high seas fleets that were starting to get the advantage. They were struggling. England and her allies were experiencing a great deal of losses, and they felt that they were going to lose the whole war. So they were petitioning America, the United States, heavily to enter the war on their side. This is World War I. And they said, look, you've got to beef up your Navy so that it's as big as our Navy, and you've got to build all these ships, and you've got to send us millions of individuals to fight, and you need to build submarines to hold back the German subs. And so with that slogan, fighting for democracy, fighting to save democracy, they were able, just with that type of statement, to galvanize a whole country. So, quote, America went to work, took over and newly implemented, these are Buckminster Fuller's words, America went to work, took over and newly implemented many of the US industries such as telephone, telegraph, and power companies, and produced all that was wanted. For the first time in history, from 1914 to 1918, humanity entered upon a comprehensive program of industrial transformation and went from wire to wireless communications, from tracked to trackless transportation, from two-dimensional transport to four-dimensional, from visible structuring and mechanical techniques to invisible atomic and molecular structuring and mechanics. Within 1 year, the 1 million armed and trained US soldiers were safely transported to France without the loss of one soldier to the submarines, and that would be the German submarines. Quote, they arrived in France, they entered the line of battle with the line of supply, and butting in here, we've talked about line of supply before, how other ships provide the ships that are closest to the battle with what they need, with their food, with their arms, with their replacement of individuals who are going to fight. With the line of supply once again more powerfully reestablished by the US Navy and its merchant fleet, it became clear that the ends, and that's what he refers to the people, the allies that were fighting against the Germans at that time, calls them the ends, were soon going to win. And that's the end of that particular quote that I wrote out there. So we're talking about how the introduction of a war scenario galvanized all of this action and made it possible for the United States to focus all on inventiveness to another level, as he described there, because of our say we have to United States to finance, you know, and he wasn't going to.
Call Dennis. We just lost Dennis. Hold on.
Say like a nation in himself, or a bank, you know, a bank is like its own country, to finance, quote, these enormous payments Mr. Morgan and his army of lawyers invented for the US government, the Liberty loans and the Victory loans. Then the US Congress invented income tax. So that's an interesting insight right there, that it was in order to pay the United States, for the United States to pay people like J.P. Morgan back for the financing of World War I. We invented the income tax.
Right.
The changing the design of the fenders or something like that. And it was a beginning of what would you call it, advertising. You know, we changed the color of the vehicle so it's a better vehicle type of thing. And he says here, quote, "This was the beginning of the downfall of the world-esteemed integrity of Yankee ingenuity, which was frequently, forthrightly, and often naively manifest in American business. Big business in the USA set out to make money deceitfully by fake, quote, new models, and engineering design advance was replaced by style design change." So that's self-explanatory there.
Good.
So the word of the bad news gradually went around. So the bad news he's talking about here is that, so they went from cars, you know, to the farming equipment. Banks felt that selling, that they would go and give farmers loans for their tractors and things like that, machinery that they needed for harvesting. But they wouldn't give loans for something like a car because they felt that was just recreational. But they thought that they could do very well if they gave loans to farmers for their farm machinery, and so they did.
Which they did.
And they went heavily into that.
And loans were, by the way, making money on money, just like the stock market. So it had nothing to do with physical loans. Dennis, do we have you back?
So then what happened?
I just want to see if Dennis is back. Dennis,
I thought I heard it.
Yes?
Yeah, I hear it.
Okay, I think my internet went down, so.
So now you guys can interact with this.
Okay. Did you hear what was Susan still broadcasting? So did you hear what she was saying about how we got between the First and Second World War and why we have an income tax? Did you hear that?
It was developed for the First World War.
Okay, well.
To pay back J.P. Morgan.
Well, were we still on air when we went off the phone?
The build up to the war.
On the screen, there was also a time where there was black screen. Screen too.
Okay, well, we're still learning on how to work this thing. We have a lousy internet connection.
Let me explain.
So let Susan re-explain real quickly if she can. Well, I can re-explain because I was listening to it. The basic problem was when they financed the First World War, they needed to get paid back for financing.
J.P. Morgan and equivalent companies and individuals.
And people, private individuals, the 1%ers,
financed the build up to the war.
They financed the build up to the First World War. And then for the U.S. And then to pay it back, they developed by law a income tax. The income tax paid J.P. Morgan back and facsimile countries.
But it turns out there wasn't enough money, even from all the allies. Even after they gave us all their gold, that still wasn't. They were still deeply in debt to the United States, even at that point. So, I'm sure J.P. Morgan made a great deal of money anyway.
Of course, but meanwhile, then the second,
because he was charging interest.
That's how we got our income tax, and then they started to finance the farmers.
And they sold Liberty bonds and war bonds and things like that.
To pay back the people who put their phony money into our system, into our political system, and they control the economics. And you call them the 1%ers, and I call them the pirates, and so because I like the idea of pirates. And it's been going on now since the beginning of civilization. The names of the families have changed, but the reason
some of them haven't.
Well, some of them are still very much. And the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the J.P. Morgans of the world, they're still putting humanity into slavery, and they don't even want to. That's their system. So that's what I'm trying to get this. The part we went blank on, we were down for like 2 minutes, I guess. But my internet went down, so we lost our connections. That's the trouble with this internet here. But anyway, we need to make sure this. Anyway, long story, but I just want to make sure that you understood that the reason why we had a Second World War, we have an income tax, was to finance the 1%ers. And it's been going on since the beginning of civilization.
And Buckminster Fuller makes the point that it was the lawyers that worked for J.P. Morgan that developed this.
And the lawyers developed a rule of law. And we have to follow the rule of law, not nature's law or God's law. We have to follow man's law, otherwise we will be shot or put in jail.
This is not unusual. This is not this is not this isn't any different than what recently happened with our collapse because of what they're saying to us was a bubble real estate market. I think there was even more behind that was more important, but in the end, it is they go back and they bail out the banks. This was bailing out J.P. Morgan essentially. He
couldn't make enough money,
and so we do the same thing in our present economics. You turn to the population. They say, okay, you're going to have to pay off
a school loan,
off the collapse of our economy. Because of the bad actors or whatever they want to blame it on, but still it comes back to population.
People being put into slavery
in order to
pay
work
off for them, right?
And
that's what your Occupy movement's about.
Banks.
They're saying it's not fair. They've been saying it's not fair since the beginning of time. Okay. They've been saying it's not fair since Plato's day. But now we have the measurement, the human renewable energy measurement, which is on your screen now.
And you explained that it actually what that does is it teaches humanity to fish. We're talking about that.
Right.
There's an old saying about that. If you give
a man a fish, you feed him once. If you teach him to fish, he's fed forever.
Right, and that's essentially the mechanism of the human renewable energy measure.
Right.
But let's go back to 1926, and so before this, the banks have seen another opportunity in providing loans to farmers. There were many, almost 90%. Of the population at that time was small farmers. That's how most people were making their living back at that time in the United States.
Products, right?
So they said, okay, we're going to give you loans as individual farmers for your harvesting equipment, for your tractors, et cetera, et cetera. So then along came, and this is quote, then there came a very bad hog market in 1926. Many farmers were unable to make the payments on their power-driven equipment. The local country banks foreclosed on the delinquent farmers' mortgages and took away their farms and machinery. The bankers had assumed that the farms were going to be readily saleable. It turned out, however, that there were not so many non-farmers waiting to become farmers. And most of the real farmers had been put out of business by the bank foreclosures, so they couldn't buy back their own farms. There were no city people eager to go out and buy one of these farms. Then he quotes, how are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris, unquote, were the words of the very popular World War I song. So you ended up, so quote, and this is Buckminster Fuller.
We got to get that song. I've never heard of that. The dust bowls developed as the upturned, unsown soil began to blow away off the farms. It is relevant to note that in 1900, 90% of USA citizens were living and working on the farms. In 1979, only 7% were on the farms, mostly as local supervisors for big, absent ownership corporations. So this was the beginning of all that farming land, and this is me talking, becoming owned by, big huge corporations that they owned thousands. And then you got the mega farms, like the Monsantos of this world.
Right, exactly. Owners of the farmlands today, quote, are no longer farmers or even individual humans. They are the great business conglomerates. And that's how they started to attach all that farming land was by these loans by the small banks to the farmers that they couldn't
And the
pay
small
off.
banks are connected to the larger banks, which are connected to the World Bank, and the people controlling the World Bank are the 1%ers that Dennis talks
Here's how
about.
it worked, and this is so familiar because we just saw this in our own lifetimes with the real estate bubble. And here's Buckminster Fuller explaining. We now return to the 1926, 27, 28, 29 sequence of events developing from selling the farmers' machinery on the bankers' drop-dead terms. And that means mortgage means, quote, on death terms, unquote. That's what the word mortgage means. Quote, in 1927 and 28, the bigger Western city banks began to foreclose on their local country banks that had financed the farm machinery sales and had been borrowing from the bigger city banks to cover their unprecedentedly expanded loaning. First the little, then the successively bigger banks found that they had foreclosed on farmhouses that had no indoor toilets, many with roofs falling in, barns in poor condition, with the farm machinery rusting out in the open and no customers. Word of the bad news went around, small bank runs began, and in 1929 came the great crash in the stock market. And
there we go, it's happening now. The crash is coming. Thank you all for listening. This has been Bridges Programming. Please look at our programming and talk about our economic system and talk about
why is it
the
keep happening over and over?
H1.org, Human Renewable Energy Measure. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, people, for listening. Sorry for the glitches, but we'll be back again and we'll keep on fighting with this deal. Thanks again.
Even trash converts to biofuels. Break loose from the stranglehold of oil companies. Renewables can fuel the world. We're here to spread the news. Oh, energy, energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone? Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy.